So we are continuing with the ideas discussed in the keynote address by Swami Sharadananji as well as Professor Mahadevan sir. While preparing for this particular panel, I was thinking, what is the distinguishing feature about Gurudev? So one idea that came to me directly, immediately was this. Gurudev firmly belonged to the Advaita tradition of Bhagavan Shankara. At the same time, he was addressing the modern, English-speaking, university-educated, men and women across the world in a language and an idiom that they are familiar with. And he spoke with so much clarity and sensitivity. I mean, there would be a lot of things that distinguishes Swamiji, Puja Gurudev, but this is that something came to me. And it is in that context we were actually thinking about what is Gurudev Swami Chinmayanandaji's contribution to spirituality. Before I start the panel, I'll just set the context. See, as Swami Sharadanji also said, right? Today, spirituality is pulled between two extremes. The first extreme is, it is a private belief. It is my personal comfort. That is one way of explaining about spirituality. It is my spirituality. People say that. On the other extreme, it is very esoteric. It is over the top. It has got nothing to do with our day-to-day life, the demands and responsibilities. Now, what exactly do we mean by spirituality here in this panel, in the context of this panel? In a way, Swami Sharadanji already explained that. But if I have to explain that in one sentence, spirituality is equal to Adhyatma in the context of this panel. And what is Adhyatma? Atmani Adhi, right? That vision for life, that vision which sees Atman as the basis for everything. So when we are defining what is spirituality, it is in this context that we are speaking about here. So in this panel, as you see, there are three distinguished scholars. Three of them will be speaking about Gurudev's contribution to spirituality at three different dimensions. Christine ji, she will be speaking from the lived experience point of view on Gurudev's contribution to spirituality. Professor Murli Madhavan ji, he will be speaking from the pedagogical method point of view. And then Ashok ji will be speaking from the institutional practices point of view. So now, I think that is enough of context for now. I would straight away go to Christine ji to speak about her perspective on Gurudev's contribution to spirituality.
Gurudev's contribution to spirituality. I spoke earlier about Gurudev coming to the West and giving sustenance to hearts that were hungry for spirituality, but we may not have articulated it as a spirituality. A sense of unhappiness, a sense of something missing, a sense of looking for meaning, and of course our attention turned to the East, from the 60s onwards. But when Gurudev came, he was Swamiji to us then, in 1984 when I met him. When he came, we were really totally surprised by the fact that such a great Mahatma would actually come and sit with us and be with us and ask us what was our problem, what was happening. He would sit around with us. So spirituality suddenly, in the company of Gurudev, became something that you could talk about. It wasn't something remote. It wasn't something that was only in textbooks. It was something about how you actually dealt with unhappiness, problems, doubts, queries that arose in your life. And Gurudev had an incredible knack of speaking in sort of very straight, simple language. So someone might come in with a problem and his first instruction to them would be, stand apart. Stand apart. Now that's not a verse from the Gita, or that's not a verse from a great scripture. It's stop, stand apart. And then he would elaborate that more, a little bit more. But it was that directness of his instruction that really touched us and made us feel that he was someone who was actually listening paying attention, meeting us where we were. So spirituality with Gurudev was dealing with a hunger that was deep within, but in such a way that we could immediately relate. It wasn't, oh my goodness, that's in Sanskrit. I can't reach that. It was you and he talking about an issue. It wasn't private. The way that he spoke was not, he didn't make you embarrassed. It was something that all could learn from. So it was the immediacy, the directness, the clear language, and the practicality that was spirituality for us with Gurudev right from the start.
Can you please elaborate on how exactly Gurudev's vision of the spirituality helped many of the modern day challenges like anxiety, the existential challenges that many people, when I say people, I predominantly mean people less than 40 years of age. Now suddenly we talk about all of these things as problems of the modern world. I'm not sure if it is exactly so, but then what exactly of Gurudev addressed some of these concerns?
I would say, first of all, that it was evident immediately that Gurudev had a deep compassion for everybody. He immediately recognized if somebody was in distress or concerned, but at the same time, he did not spoon feed us. He did not pander to negative reactions. He would first of all say, greet you, how good it is to see you, come and sit here. He might give you a hug, but then someone would start telling him the problem. And I remember someone coming once to him who was broken-hearted because they'd had a broken relationship or a failed marriage or something. And Gurudev started giving these massive, these sort of great dramatic sobs, And then he'd say, oh, you're in love with a bubble. He'd say like that. Now, encapsulated in that being in love with a bubble is the whole idea of something transient, Transient, not going to last. You've invested your whole self in that. But everybody who was there, we laughed, but we also almost cried because it was our own folly. Straight away, we could see our own folly. The message was so deep, so powerful, touched with humor, but deep compassion.
Thank you, ma'am. So we'll move on to the next aspect of Gurudev's focus on spirituality. Professor Murli Madhavan sir. Sir, could you please elaborate on the Gurudev's pedagogical methods? Like, for example, he was very committed to the traditional Vedanta way of learning, Shravana Manana Nididhyasana. At the same time, he also created a new pedagogy because he was also offering it to a whole new set of people who might not qualify under the traditional way of being a Vedantic scholar. So can you give us some light on what you think about it?
Sudhismriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpada Shankaram Loga Shankaram Chinmaya Acharya Padabja Paraga Paramanavaha Vitnyana Amoda Subhagaha Spurandu Hridaye Sada. Here, His Holiness Tejamayanda Swamiji is here. His Holiness Advaita Swamiji is here, who is the Jivatma and Paramatma of CF. And Professor Gauri Maulikar is there. Actually, when I heard the entire presentation of Sharadananda Swamiji regarding the Shravana Manana Nididhyasana, which I want to say about the pedagogy of the Vedantic sadhana, I want to give some observations on that. The realization of the self, which is the highest human value, that is Parama Purushartha, has the following as its requirements. This is what traditionally, all our acharyas have explained. The performance of Nitya and Naimittika, the two different duties, that is incidental and also what we call the daily, what is to be done, obligatory, and the sadhana chadushtaya, the fourfold equipment on one hand, and the practice of Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana on the other hand. Actually, the karma and the sadhana chadushtaya could be regarded as behiranga, and that is called external. But the sadhana chadushtaya, which follows the purification of mind through the performance of karmas, that duties, consists of some 4, this sadhana chadushtaya, which is nitya anitya vastu viveka, that is called the discriminating knowledge of what is eternal and non-eternal. Nitya anitya vastu viveka, and ihamutrartha bhala bhoga viraga, that is the non-attachment to the results of the enjoyment of the fruits here and hereafter. And the third one is Shamadhi Shatka Sambati, that is Shama, Dhamma, Uparadiya, this the sixfold system. And the last one, Mumukshutva. This is Gurudev teaches Bhagavad Gita, and the entire Bhagavad Gita can be divided into equal 3 parts. The first one is Shravana, the first 6 chapters, and the second part, 6 chapters, will be Manana, and the last portion will be Nididhyasana. He gives very, very beautifully, clearly mentions, and the first 6 chapters are Shravana, and the second set represents Manana, and but here, what the pedagogical, some shift has been, paradigm shift has been happened. In tradition, Shravana is the hearing. The Vedic, Tatvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, such Mahavakyas, Vedic sentences. But when Swamiji says that, when it comes to Manana, Manana is not something simply logically thinking about it, about the subject, what you heard, but it is an intensified Shravana. Manana is an intensified Shravana. And likewise, when he comes to Nididhyasana, actually brooding over that Atman, the very Atman, the Atma Tattva, there also he says that it is intensified Manana. So this is something not very agreeable to the tradition, but at the same time, when you discuss, finally, at the end of the day, you come back to the same point without much difference. This difference he has made mainly because that to what we call to bridge the tradition and the modernity, or the traditional system and the modern system of pedagogy of Vedantic sadhana in a practical way. So this practical thing is there in the case of pedagogy. What I want to say this. This is the first phase.
Sir, very beautifully put, sir. That actually reminds of another question. So today, spirituality is considered to be an integral part of psychology. And in psychology, when you're talking about the mind, etc., a lot of ideas have been borrowed from the traditional Vedantic way of understanding the mind, etc. So, sir, according to you, how much of this contribution has come from Gurudev's way of presenting Vedanta? Gurudev also presented it as a very psychological approach, right? So how much of it has contributed into the modern psychological way of understanding the mind?
Actually, the answer of this question, it depends upon the furthering of the topic just now we covered about Shravana and Manana. Psychologically, when you speak, when you come to the last part of the Nididhyasana, there Swamiji the Gurudev makes it very clear that the meditation upon Brahman with a firm conviction is called nididhyasana or dhyana. But Swamiji shows that the nididhyasana as a direct Brahman realization itself, and it arises as the result of Sravana and Manana. So, according to Sureshwaracharya is, as the student of Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya was strictly on Vedic lore path. He says that Sravana, Manana and Nididhyasana was equal importance and in sequence. But Sureshwaracharya insists on that. This is a psychological aspect. The Shravana and Manana, these two things are instrumental to bring Nididhyasana in experience, and that Nididhyasana itself is the Brahman realization. Sureshwaracharya in his commentary, he has mentioned in no other, all these things are called as triple means. That means the Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana. But here, Nididhyasana, in the case of Sureshwaracharya, it comes as the final goal. That itself is the real, what we call, it is not means, it is the lakshya. It is the aim.
Thank you, sir. Moving on quickly to Ashok ji. Ashok ji, can you elaborate upon the role of Sandipani Sadhanalaya and how Gurudev has actually conceived it and how he scheduled it to achieve the purpose it is supposed to achieve?
Hari Om. Om Shri Chinmaya Sadguruve Namaha. So, Sandipani Sadhanalaya is the 2-year Vedanta course which was established in 1963 by Swami Chinmayananda, mainly to bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and modern thinking rooted in logic. To bridge the gap between the mindset that is tuned to when I believe it, I will see it, and the mindset when I see it, I will believe it. So this gap is addressed by Sandipani Sadhanalaya with the 2-year Vedanta course. So if you look at the name Sandipani Sadhanalaya, Sandipani is the Guru of Sri Krishna, and Gurudev sends the message that without the grace of the Guru, without the teachings from a Guru, spiritual knowledge is not possible. And Sri Krishna himself is not an exception for that. He himself had a Guru. So it underscores the importance of Guru in our spiritual progress. Then the second part of the word, Sadhanalaya. Alaya means a place, and sadhana is a place where we not only study the scriptures in a systematic way, but as we discussed so far, to a place where we can practice our Vedantic sadhana of Shravanam, Mananam and Nididhyasanam. So that is the main goal of the Sandipani Sadhanalaya, is to create an inner transformation in the students of Sandipani. So Gurudev, when he started this journey to spread the message of Vedanta, he realized in his own words, he said, I need 100 Vivekanandas to spread this message. He created a platform that spans all ages, right from Balvihar, Chik, then for the Grahasthas and the Vanaprasthas, he created a platform, and he needed these Vivekanandas to spread the message through this platform, and hence he established Sandipani Sadhanalaya. So what is Sandipani Sadhanalaya? It's a standardized 2-year Vedanta course. So standardized meaning, the teachings is given in a very systematic manner through the studies of granthas starting from Tattva Bodha, Drishya Vivek, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and finally from the Brahma Sutra. So it's a very systematic approach to disseminate this knowledge. And it is also a very intensive course. So intensive meaning that you have to be available to the course 24 hours every day. There are no breaks. There are no breaks for Diwali. There are no breaks for any festivals. Every day is a study day in Sandipani Sadhanalaya. So by putting the students through a very rigorous approach, the whole benefit of Vedanta can be achieved and sadhana also can be achieved at the same time, contributing to the inner growth of the student. And the whole course started in English. By doing that, he democratized the Vedantic knowledge, meaning you didn't Sanskrit, only a privileged few knew Sanskrit, and if you were to have a course in Sanskrit, you're going to shut off a lot of people automatically. And his main audience was the educated Indian who was very conversant in English and very comfortable in English. So he started this course in English, and because of that, it also had a global reach. The Indian diaspora have moved globally to various countries, and in fact, the interest that you have in the US today, I would say, is probably much more than the interest that is happening in India. Right? Because of Balavihar and because of the urge to be with the Indian tradition, the whole learning process has been taken very seriously abroad. So by doing it in English, he was able to reach out to the entire world. The next goal of Sandipani Sadhanalaya was social transformation through individual clarity. So it strives to educate the students in such a way that they're very clear about all the concepts of Vedanta. So the individual clarity is very important, so that this clarity can then be communicated through the Chinmaya platform to all age groups. So that was another aspect of Sandipani Sadhanalaya, is to provide clarity through the process of Shravanam, Mananam and Nididhyasanam that happens in the ashram. So this is the role of Sandipani Sadhanalaya in propagating Vedanta to the world.
Thank you, Ashok ji. In the beginning, we mentioned about one of the extreme way of looking at spirituality as very esoteric, got nothing to do with the world that we are dealing with. It is all up. So, Gurudev actually, from what Ashok ji also said right now, one thing we all know is Gurudev's work itself was a response to this whole idea of spirituality or Adhyatma has got nothing to do with this world, but it is a very esoteric concept. So that actually takes me to the next question. In a way, you have partly answered that in your previous question itself, but for the sake of asking it a little more explicitly, can you think of instances where Gurudev's pedagogy, the Gurudev's way of training in the Sandipani Sadhanalaya, has led people not only with the inner transformation, but also excellence in terms of their outward expression? Can you think of any examples you can give us?
So, Gurudev's journey into spirituality itself started when he saw that there was dynamism in spirituality. When he went to the Divine Life Society, he went there with a different motive, but what he saw, a person in Swami Shivananda who had established a world-class organization to disseminate Vedanta, but also equal emphasis on serving. Whatever qualification I have there as a student, I serve the society with that qualification, and he himself was an example of that. He continued to be a doctor while running this whole Divine Life Society. So he was a doctor to all the Rishi Munis of the Himalayan Valley. Right? So that is one way I can think of where he brought dynamism into spirituality. He impressed upon us that attitude defines action. Right? A sattvic attitude, whether the action is tamasic, rajasic or sattvic, but if the attitude behind that action is sattvic, then that makes the action sattvic. And he classifies action in 3 categories. One is a laborer, the other category is a worker, and the third category is a person of achievement. So a worker, a doctor can be a laborer if his attitude is tamasic, right? Or a production worker can be sattvic if his attitude is sattvic. So this was Gurudev's message to the world, that we have to perform whatever we do with an attitude of sattva. Right? And centered to this is karma yoga. He was a big proponent of karma yoga. That is, you perform your actions without ego and egocentric desires, not attached to the fruit of your actions, and make yourself as an instrument of the Lord. It is the Lord's work that is getting done, not my work, and I am just an instrument in the whole process. So that was his central message, which he himself benefited a lot, and it was this message that he wanted to spread to the entire world, that we have to perform our nitya karma and naimittika karma in the spirit of karma yoga, and that makes it as a niyata karma. So this is the contribution of Gurudev to us, how we can bring spirituality to every moment of our life.
Thank you, Ashok ji. I have a question which came to me when I was preparing for this panel. This question, I will articulate this question, and I would request all 3 of you to share your thoughts on this. So these days, when we look at the corporate training as well as the leadership training programs, Vedanta is a module of the corporate training workshops. Of course, there are also workshops which are fully modeled on Vedanta. The question that is related to this is, now when we introduce Vedanta in a corporate training module or a corporate training model, is there a danger of collapsing it or reducing it into a self-help theory kind of a program, where Vedanta is actually taken out of its framework of Shastra, Sadhana, Upasana, all of these, right? So, is there a danger of taking Vedanta in the corporate training workshop where ultimately it end up as a subset of one of the leadership programs? Or is there something that we should think about so that Vedanta is preserved in the way it is supposed to be propagated? This is a question to all 3 of you.
We studied with Gurudev in his lectures. We also studied the Upanishads and the Gita. We studied the highest teachings, and that, of course, was absolutely sublime, and that was the foundation for our study. But in terms of Gurudev's contribution to spirituality, I think it's really important to say that Gurudev was the essence of spirituality. He was established in spirituality all the time. So we learn from him in the lectures, but whenever we were with him in any other context, he was also teaching and also demonstrating what a spiritual life is like, and sometimes in very interesting ways. So I recall sitting, Gurudev used to enjoy watching tennis sometimes, quite often. So we would watch tennis with Gurudev, and once I was watching and the program finished and the television screen went into its pattern of nothing there, and Gurudev was staring at the screen, and I was just sitting beside him, and suddenly he said, "Substratum." There wasn't a moment when we weren't getting a teaching from Gurudev in some way or another. So his contribution to spirituality, householders, Vedanta students, children. Layla, who's here, said when I interviewed her, she said, "Not many adults listen to you, but Gurudev listened to me." Children, everybody. He was always in a spiritual dimension.
Thank you, Krishnaji. Ashokji, you were...
Yeah, sure. So, I don't think we need to dilute Vedanta to present it in the corporate world. Because at the end of the day, whether I'm working in the corporation or whether I'm working at home, the goal is happiness, right? So Vedanta clearly defines what happiness is, and everybody also wants to know, who am I? Where am I going? What should be the vision, right? And we all have 5-year visions, 10-year vision, but beyond that, it's very difficult for a normal person to think beyond. And Vedanta clearly tells you what your end goal is, what is happiness, who you are. So if we are able to communicate in a way that everybody can understand it, and for which Gurudev has already created the BMI tool, right? So you don't have to dilute anything. We just bring a different perspective and actually provide answers that they're actually seeking for,
Sir, Madhavan sir, do you have some thoughts on this question, or any other question you would like to take?
Actually, I have not completed the point I have mentioned.
Yes, sir.
That one of the lectures in Gita Jnana Yajna of Gurudev, he mentioned, he was talking about the Vedanta and other things, and how Hinduism has taken it as a whole. And then he asked one question. We say that the neighbor should not be injured. He should not be killed. He should be loved. Why we should love our neighbor? Swamiji asked, why we should love our neighbor? Why we should not injure others? There is no answer, proper answer, until the Vedanta came into existence. Vedanta is the answer for that. Because the same spirit is there in everybody. If you harm others, you are harming yourself. So this is a great message he has given. This has a great psychological impact in this. Swamiji in one place in Gita Jnana Yajna, regarding when he talks about the Shravana and Manana like that, he told that Shravana is Thula and Manana is Sukshma and Nididhyasana is Sukshmatara. And this is something very, what we call, agreeable to the standpoints of Sureshwaracharya. So this type of, he creates all these things, he interprets all these things, Gurudev, that he wants to, what we call, to the bridge the tradition, and without leaving any vital element in that, without leaving any principal doctrines in that, at the same time giving a more agreeable extension to the core idea, to the society. So you speak about society, you speak about the individuals, you speak about love, you speak about this, what we call compassion. All these things we speak. He was mentioning about Gandhiji. And Gandhiji, he found out the principle of ahimsa from Advaita Vedanta. And Gandhiji, in several places, he say that in Young India, he is telling, when he writes the editorial, he told that I am an Advaitin. I am an Advaitin, and I believe in ahimsa. And the entire ahimsa is based on the Bhashya of Shankaracharya. So this is.
Thank you, sir. I mean, that was a very lucid explanation indeed. So right now, I thought maybe we can take 5 more minutes to share some of the ideas that the speakers themselves may want to share, which they could not cover in the questions. So that is open.
Probably I would just say that, I'm from Australia, from the West, not a knower of Sanskrit, but in terms of this principle of ahimsa, I was just reminded that it's a fundamental principle of Vedanta, of Hinduism, but a bit unfamiliar in the West. So Gurudev explained that principle to the Western audience there by talking about, this is not very technical, but it was highly effective, talking about a mother chicken with her little chicks and all the little chicks following the mother. And he built up such a story of motherly love for these little chickens. And then he enacted of the mother. And everybody cried. And that was an incredibly effective way to open the topic of ahimsa. So from the scholarly approaches to the very practical approaches, it's very powerful teaching.
I also feel in between that Guruji has done a wonderful, what we call, approaching the entire, the Vedantic idea. And he has done one spade work in between, that he has his hermeneutical exercises in explaining these kramas, these consecutive, because asking about pedagogy of Vedanta, Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana, he has, I think, 3 different types of approaches I have shown. That means Shravana and Manana becoming the means of Nididhyasana. Shravana and Manana and Nididhyasana combined together as the means for triple means for Tattvajnana, like that, in different ways. And as I told you about Sureshwaracharya, how he has interpreted these 3 different, from these, looking into the entire, from 3 different dimensions. I feel that without leaving any core ideas or core principles laid by our great preceptors in ancient darshanas, that's Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Purva Mimamsa, Uttara Mimamsa, Sankhya and Yoga. I think based on these Shaddarshanas, he had exercised his, what we call, hermeneutical way of presenting all these things. So, everything is based on our Indian tradition, Indian darshana, and strictly on our tradition. But yes, it's on a bright, modern face to be present.
Thank you, sir. That's definitely a direct answer on the pedagogy question. Yes. Ashokji, you were mentioning something? No. Right. So I think with that, we can actually come to a close of the session. I would actually summarize some of the points that came out of this discussion. So what is the common thread between these 3 dimensions we looked at? The lived experience plus pedagogic method as well as the institutional practice. I think one common thread that came is Vedanta is not just a theory to be admired. Rather, it is a vision to be understood, lived and tested amidst our everyday life. And I personally think the brilliance of Gurudev is also that he did not make Vedanta another doctrine. Rather, he actually represented Vedanta as a true reflective tradition, which it actually is. So instead of converting it into another set of doctrine, he actually helped continue the reflective tradition of Vedanta very much alive. And with respect to education, Gurudev never focused on information and certification as two important pillars of education, which modern education actually is. So when we talk about Sandhipani Sadhanalaya and all other ways of study that Gurudev introduced, true to that Bharatiya tradition, it was never about information and certification. Rather, it was about the transformation, the gradual organic transformation the individual will undergo over a period of time. And I think that aspect of Bharatiya education is once again reiterated through Gurudev's work. And as Ashokji also pointed out, it is about the internal clarity, the inner clarity that all of us achieve, and that inner clarity expressing itself, manifesting itself outside, which will result in our existence in harmony with the rest of the world. So I think these are some of the ideas that are common to all the three dimensions. With that, I think we can come to a close. With your permission, I close the session. Thank you so much. Hari Om.